Dave Pearson always thought he'd have a simple life, combining family togetherness with running a business after leaving the military. He set up a company in suburban Philadelphia, believing that hard work would lead to success. He was dedicated to his work, but even more so to his family, his wife Linda, daughter Ally, and loyal employees. Over time, he built a thriving business. The company felt like one big extended family, with employees who became close beyond the office walls. The company did well through teamwork, and Dave was proud not just of the growing revenue, but also of the strong sense of community he had built. Employees celebrated, mourned, and supported each other, forming bonds that brought Dave immense satisfaction. One Friday night, Dave stood content in his quiet office. He was proud of his 33 employees and the way they worked together, especially his wife Linda, who handled the finances, and his brother Rich, who was good at sales. He had no idea that this happiness wouldn't last. His thoughts were interrupted by his office manager Hannah, who asked if he needed anything for the next day's pork roast. Dave smiled and jokingly asked why she was calling him boss when Hannah said she really ran the place, and Dave agreed. Then she asked if he needed anything, and Dave told her Linda had it all covered. He spotted Linda nearby and called out to her. She teased him, asking if he meant her. Dave playfully replied, asking who else he would be talking about. Everyone laughed. He explained that he and Hannah were debating who the real boss was. Linda smirked. Hannah said that everyone knew she ran the place. She added that Linda was the boss at home. Dave laughed and didn't answer. Linda joked that it was better when neither of them wore trousers, which made everyone laugh. Dave said he was happy that they were still in their honeymoon phase after 17 years. Hannah then asked if anything was needed for the next day. Hannah confirmed everything was set and asked how many people were coming. She said there would be 28 employees, 26 family members, and 31 kids. Linda said there'd be enough food. She then asked Hannah if she was bringing anyone. Hannah smiled but said she was on her own. Linda offered to introduce her to someone, but Hannah said she'd prefer not to. Dave stepped in and told Linda said she was sorry and that she didn't mean to make Hannah feel bad. Hannah thanked her and said she was fine. Later on, as Dave and Linda walked to the car to go out for their usual Friday night, Dave asked Linda if she'd made the reservation. She told him she had and listed the dishes she'd ordered: Mongolian beef for Dave and General Tso's chicken for Ally, and a seafood platter for herself. As they drove home, Linda noticed Dave had grown quiet and asked if something was wrong. Dave hesitated before admitting that while life was great, he was starting to realize how quickly Ally was growing up. Soon it would just be the two of them, as Ally would start having her own date nights and eventually go to college. Linda reassured him that Ally would always be their little girl, but Dave let out a little sigh, acknowledging that kids do grow up, even if he wasn't entirely happy about it. Linda, trying to cheer him up, suggested turning their Friday nights into Chinese movie nights, just the two of them. Dave smiled at the idea, feeling a bit better. Dave and Linda entered the house, where their daughter Ally rushed to hug her father, beaming with there was a lot of excitement. Their dog Banjo barked joyfully and sniffed the bags of food that had been dropped. Ally announced that she had received an A on her geometry exam. Dave grinned and reminded her that he had told her it would be okay. Ally admitted she hadn't believed him but kissed his cheek in appreciation. Linda watched proudly, noting Ally's strong bond with her father, just as she had with her. Over dinner, they chatted animatedly. Afterwards, they moved to the family room. Dave settled in and asked whose turn it was to pick the movie. Ally quickly claimed it and chose Robin Hood, Men in Tights. Dave had mentioned this older comedy. He chuckled and joked that the film was old. He was surprised that she hadn't picked the next one. John Wick movie. Linda said there'd be no more action movies that night. Ally laughed, saying she'd lost count of the bodies in the previous film after 100. She said tonight's movie would be fun. They sat on the couch. Dave was struck by how quickly Ally was growing up. Dave was uneasy about her eventual departure the next morning. Dave's brother Rich and his wife Sonia arrived early to help with preparations for the big gathering while Sonia and Ally worked inside. Dave, Linda, and Rich took care of the outdoor tasks as Dave cleaned the pool. He felt a familiar rumbling and headed inside, calling out to Linda that he needed to use the bathroom. Linda joked that he shouldn't stink up the guest powder room, which Ally had just cleaned. Dave decided to use the basement bathroom instead, appreciating the quiet, dark space where he could relax as he settled in. He overheard a conversation outside the small window and recognized Linda's voice speaking anxiously to Rich. She expressed concern that Dave might catch them, but Dave's heart sank as he listened, dread building with each word Linda mentioned. She told Rich that their boys had brought home forms for a DNA test and asked if Ali's school had done the same. Rich replied that he wasn't aware of it. Then Rich asked Dave if Linda had ever found out if he was Ali's father. Dave admitted that she had. Dave had been avoiding it, but he said he'd check with the school. Rich was quiet for a moment, then he asked if they should stop their affair. He said there was a risk, but Linda said they'd managed to get away with it for years and she didn't want Dave to find out because it would ruin them both. Rich said he might start fresh, but Linda got really angry and called him a prick. She said they had a meeting on Tuesday at 6. At 6 o'clock at Valley View, they then parted ways, leaving Dave and Stun in silence. His world felt like it was collapsing around him. Dave closed the window, feeling sick. Tears flowed as he whispered, "What am I going to do?" The pain was unbearable, but he knew he couldn't confront them now, with a house full of guests expected soon. He had to act normal, even though his heart was shattered. After almost 20 minutes in the basement, Dave knew he had to come out. "What can I do?" He thought frantically. He whispered he needed to get out of there to give himself time to compose himself. He splashed water on his face to hide his distress and went upstairs, determined to act normal. When he saw Sonia, he said, "Tell Linda I'm getting ice." She replied, unaware of the turmoil he was in at the store. Dave took a few minutes to walk and think. Walking usually cleared his mind, but this time tears welled up in his eyes. He was frustrated and shouted, "Stop it." He wasn't used to being emotional, and it made him angry. He needed to stay in. He needed to stay in control and come up with a plan to get through the party and the days ahead without anyone noticing. The walk calmed him a bit and he began to form a strategy, realizing he'd been gone too long. He bought 8 bags of ice and headed home, bracing himself for what lay ahead. Ally greeted him first, noticing his distress. She asked what was wrong and Dave quickly lied, saying his stomach was upset and he had to pull over. He asked her to move the ice to the freezer, explaining that Ally agreed to go and tell Linda. Dave hoped a few hours alone would help him regain control. When Linda checked on him, he told her he had stomach cramps and vomiting but no fever. She sympathized and told him to rest, saying everyone would understand if he didn't join the party. Left alone, Dave paced and planned. He concluded that divorce was inevitable and that both Linda and his parents would be fired. He thought about the financial impact and the effect on Sonia. Dave was worried about losing Ally, even though she wasn't biologically related to him. He was trying to stay calm. Ally came upstairs and asked if he was okay. Dave said he needed to rest before the guests arrived. Their dog, Banjo, jumped onto the bed and licked Dave's face, wiping away his tears. Ally smiled and said she had brought him a friend and that she loved him. She kissed his forehead and in that moment, Dave felt her love and knew he had made the right decision. He realized Ally needed to know the truth before the confrontation, though he hated that it was necessary. Dave wondered what Linda and Rich were thinking, finding their betrayal incomprehensible. He knew he would soon expose their treachery and destroy the perfect life he once had. Bitterness filled him as he thought, damn them. Despite everything, Dave managed to be sociable with the guests. Linda and Rich were too busy to interact with him, which was a relief. Hannah noticed something was off but said nothing. Dave kept Ally close, drawing strength from her presence. She assumed his need for closeness was due to his supposed illness, helping him maintain his cover after helping with the cleaning. Dave announced he was heading to bed early, choosing the guest room as an excuse, which Linda accepted. He felt satisfied that his plan for the first night had worked. In the morning, the family went to church together. During the service, Dave pretended to get a text, catching Linda's attention. She gave him a questioning look, but he whispered to her later after the service that the owner of Gupta Water Equipment needed him for a meeting on Monday and he'd be back by Tuesday. When Linda asked where, Dave told her Pittsburgh. He added that he'd left that afternoon to get some rest. Linda then asked if they were still going to his parents' house for lunch. Dave confirmed that they were, but mentioned that he would drive separately so that Linda and Ally could stay longer. Dave felt satisfied with how things were going. He successfully avoided Rich during brunch, and Linda was too preoccupied to notice his emotional assistance after lunch. Dave left, but stopped by afterwards. He went back to the house to get some paperwork and checked into a hotel near their business. He then called his attorney, Bill, who was also a close friend. Dave explained the situation to Bill, who had gone through a similar divorce. Although Bill wasn't a family lawyer, he recommended his colleague Angela, who specialized in such cases. Bill called Angela, and she agreed to meet them for dinner. During dinner, Dave learned that Bill and Angela were engaged. They spent the evening discussing strategy and Angela scheduled a Monday meeting to finalize the details. Dave was ready to serve Linda with divorce papers by Friday. At one point, Dave stepped out to call home, pretending he was already in Pittsburgh. Linda answered, asking how he was feeling. Dave said he was a bit tired but okay. Then he asked if Ally was there. Linda confirmed that she was watching TV next to her. Dave asked to be put on speakerphone, and Ally excitedly told him she missed him. Dave assured her that he'd be home for their date on Tuesday, and Ally brightened, saying she would pick a movie for them after saying their goodbyes. Linda felt a little hurt by the brief conversation, but assumed Dave was just exhausted from the long drive. He opened the hotel window, hoping for some fresh air, but was hit with dumpster odors. He thought, just perfect. He shut the window and spent the night wrestling with his thoughts. The next day, the meeting with Bill and Angela went well. That evening, Dave made another brief call home, claiming he was having dinner with clients. In reality, he was strategizing alone in his hotel room. He was dreading the next day when he would have to explain everything to Ally. He knew it would force her to grow up too fast. It was a conversation he really didn't want to have. Tuesday morning, Dave met with his attorney to settle company-related issues and the severance packages for Linda and Rich. After lunch, he arrived at the office pretending he had just returned from Pittsburgh. Seeing Hannah got him pretty emotional. Instead of heading straight to his office, he awkwardly smiled and then shut the door behind him. He told himself to get a grip. He reviewed his plans, took a deep breath and called Hannah into his office. "Hi Dave," she greeted him, but her smile quickly faded when she saw his tear-streaked face. She ignored office etiquette by hugging him. Hannah rushed to hug him. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No," he replied, his voice shaking. "I'm not sick, but something's really messed up." Hannah pulled up a chair and held his hand. "What's going on?" "Is it Linda?" she asked, seeing the pain in his eyes. He nodded, struggling to speak. "Your brother," she finally said, her voice filled with shock. She paced the room, fuming, before calming down to hug Dave again. "You found out before the..." She trailed off. Dave nodded and explained how he'd overheard their conversation and realized the truth. "There's no way you'll stay with her," Hannah said. "They've been together for 16 years. "I can't get over it," Hannah said, pouring them both a rum and coke. After a few sips, they moved on to business. "Rich and Linda will be fired after Friday. I want Sonia to take over Linda's job, but I'll need you to cover for her." "Duties temporarily, I can handle it," Hannah assured him. "For sales, I'm considering promoting Debbie Gleon. She's shown interest and I think she'd do well." "I agree," Hannah said. "Tammy Fields could replace Debbie. Let them know we'll meet Monday to discuss their promotions. Could you also draft job descriptions before then? Anything else?" Tears welled up in Dave's eyes. "You're one of my closest friends." "My closest friends, and I'm losing Linda, my best friend. I may need to lean on you more." Hannah hugged him tightly. "It's my privilege after leaving the office." Hannah felt deeply for Dave, knowing he didn't deserve such pain. The next morning, Linda paced the kitchen, tormented by her choices. She hadn't been with Rich in nearly a year and wondered why she ever got involved with him. She was determined to end it. Good, she told herself that Rich wouldn't tell Dave because he had too much to lose. She was deep in thought when Dave walked in and she threw herself into his arms, kissing him. Surprised, Dave asked what had brought on the affection. Linda said she loved him and missed him since the picnic. Dave, lying, said he missed her too, while wondering how she'd react if he asked about Rich. Dave mentioned taking Ally to Vincent's for Italian in a movie. Linda asked if he had plans that night. When Dave inquired why she flinched slightly, she replied that she was going shopping at the mall. Dave teased her about window shopping, and Linda forced a smile, saying that she might see if anything caught her eye. Dave added, "Shop safely," and immediately regretted it when Linda questioned as he brushed it off as a joke, noticing her unease. Fortunately, Ally came downstairs, breaking the tension. Ally greeted Dave with excitement, and they discussed their plans as they left. Linda felt a mix of pride, love, guilt, and remorse. After waiting 20 minutes, she grabbed her keys and headed out to meet Rich. Dave and Ally drove away, feeling anxious. He was really taken aback, so he took a few deep breaths and held Ally's hand to apologize for the change in plans. Ally was a bit concerned and asked why. Dave explained that they wouldn't have a fancy dinner or see a movie, but that they needed to talk and see something important. Ally was worried and asked if it was a secret from her mom. Dave assured her that they'd explain everything when they got home. They drove in silence until they reached Chick-fil-A. Dave grabbed some food and then headed to a small office complex near the Valley View Motel. Ally asked why they were there. Dave hesitated before revealing that Linda was having an affair and would be meeting her lover there soon. Ally was shocked and refused to believe it. Dave sadly confirmed her fears. As they watched two cars pull into the motel, Ally saw her mom's car followed by Uncle Rich got out of the car and walked into the motel with Linda. Ally and Dave were both devastated and hugged each other as they took pictures of the encounter. They watched Linda and Rich embrace and enter a motel room together. Dave apologized to Ally, who, through tears, realized the gravity of the situation. She vowed to stay with her father, rejecting her mother. Dave promised to do everything he could to keep her with him. Ally, angry at the situation, said that if she had to stay with her mother, she would make her life difficult. Dave knew it wasn't the time to encourage an open mind about her relationship with Linda. He warned Ally that the hardest part was coming and that they would need to act normally until he confronted Linda on Friday. Ally, overwhelmed, expressed doubt that she could do it. Dave told her they'd get through it together. They left the motel to find somewhere quiet to talk. Dave drove to a secluded picnic area in a nearby park. They spent the evening talking, planning, crying, and venting their frustrations. The experience brought them closer than ever, making it feel like it was them against the world. They returned home just after 10 p.m. It was 10 o'clock by the time they got back. But Ally wasn't sure how she'd manage to act normal for the next 3 days. "Daddy, I'm not sure I can see her without wanting to slap her. Some kind of relationship with her. It'll never be the same. I won't respect her." Ally replied bitterly. "Let's stick to the plan for now." Added Daddy, "I really love you. I don't know how you're handling this, but I'm here for you." Dave smiled as they pulled into the driveway. "How did I get so lucky to have such an amazing daughter?" he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You're not a slacker, Daddy. You're the best man I know and the best dad a girl could ask for." They quietly entered the house, relieved to find Linda already in bed. Ally kept her emotions in check while Dave found Linda pretending to sleep, knowing she'd been with Rich. He was grateful they both avoided any. They lay back to back in bed, each lost in their own painful thoughts, tears silently falling. The next morning, Dave woke up, smelled the coffee, and got dressed for his trip. He checked on Ally, who was ready in the kitchen. Linda was making pancakes and greeted him cheerfully. Dave hugged her and kissed her neck at the right moment. Ally entered and greeted her parents, playing along. Dave asked Ally if she slept well after her date with that hot guy. Ally confirmed and asked Linda if she had asked her yet. Linda looked confused. Dave explained that he needed to go back to Pittsburgh and that Ally wanted to join him. Linda agreed, saying Ally would make the trip more enjoyable. They quickly finished breakfast and were soon on the road, relieved to be away from home. On the way, Ally asked how she did. Dave assured her she did great, adding that her idea to come along was a good one. It made acting unnecessary. Ally joked about bad acting, and Dave chuckled after a pause. Ally asked if Dave had thought about her being there when he confronted Linda. Dave wasn't sure yet, but Ally insisted she wanted to be there even when he confronted Rich. Dave gently reminded her about her language was strong, and Ally replied that the situation deserved it. Dave admired her strength and asked what she would say if she were there. Ally wasn't sure, but said she wanted her mom to know she couldn't hide from her and that she was on Dave's side. They checked into a hotel, and in the elevator, Ally quietly asked, "When?" Dave said he didn't know exactly when the affair started, but it was a long time ago. Ally's eyes welled up with tears as she began to ask a question, but Dave gently interrupted, assuring her that whatever the answer, it wouldn't change anything between them. They walked to their room in silence. Once inside, Ally asked if Dave wanted to know. Dave wasn't sure if he should tell Ally everything, so he asked her if she wanted to know. Ally said that she knew who her dad was, but she thought it was a good idea to find out more. She added that she wasn't sure if she could handle having two parents who were unfaithful. Dave asked her gently if she wanted to know, and Ally admitted that she did. Dave suggested that they wait a few months. Over the next few months, Dave explained that he had reasons to hold off for now. Ally hugged him tightly, tears in her eyes, and they began unpacking in silence, finding comfort in each other's presence during their hotel stay. Dave and Ally kept in touch, especially when Dave met with lawyers or handled business. Ally spent time by the pool swimming or on the first day. Hannah joined them to discuss strategy, and they had dinner together later on. Ally and Hannah got along well, and back in the room, Ally opened up to Dave. Ally mentioned that Hannah had feelings for him, surprising Dave when she asked if anything had happened between them. Dave was shocked. He told her he'd never been unfaithful to her mother. Ally was upset and said sorry for doubting him. Dave said her questions were understandable. They were both wondering why Linda had been unfaithful. They hoped to find out more on Friday. The next day, Hannah called Linda to discuss work. She asked about the month at the end of the call. He said the IT guy needed Linda's laptop for updates and a virus check. Linda said she'd be at the office all day and agreed to have lunch with Hannah. Hannah felt a mix of relief and sadness knowing what was coming on Friday the next morning. Ally found her father staring out the window with tears in his eyes when she asked if he was okay. Dave admitted Dave asked if she was ready for a tough day. Ally sighed and said that she wasn't sure. Dave then asked if she thought she could forgive Linda and stay. Ally said that she couldn't see her mother the same way after all the lies. They hugged, drawing strength from each other. Ally expressed gratitude for being included. Dave was touched by her maturity. He asked if she was okay. She said she was fine as long as he was, and they shared a small smile before getting down to business. After breakfast, they packed up, checked out, and headed to the lawyer's office. Bill and Angela were there, impressed with Ally's composure during the divorce discussions. Ally participated actively, offering good suggestions. Angela remarked on how well Ally was handling it. Dealing with the situation, Ally said she'd like to work in law, as it was her favorite TV genre. Angela suggested she think about joining their paralegal team in the future, and Ally was really interested. She told Dave she was strong enough to face what was coming up. After lunch, Dave and Ally went shopping and got back home at around 3:30 p.m. The weight of the impending confrontation hung heavily, and the silence between them added to the tension. Dave laid out the evidence on the dining room table and suggested they play cribbage to pass the time. They had about an hour before everything would change. The sound of the garage door opening signaled the moment had arrived. Ally and Dave sat at the table. Pretending Linda walked in with packages, cheerfully announcing the Chinese food is here, let's start the party. But then she saw their serious faces and realized what was going on. Hey, what's going on? Linda asked, approaching the table. Sit down, Dave said quietly but firmly. Linda hesitated but sat down, noticing the photo from her meeting with Rich. She was shocked and nearly missed the chair, tears filling her eyes. Her eyes were filled with tears as she whispered, "No, no, no." She looked up to see Dave and Ally staring at her with contempt. "Please, Dave, don't do what I deserve," Linda pleaded. Through tears, Dave paused before asking, "What do you think you deserve?" "Please don't leave me," Linda begged. "Don't leave me like you threw away our marriage and family." Dave responded, his voice controlled but bitter. "It was a terrible mistake," she cried out. "How long did this mistake last?" Dave asked, sounding pretty angry. Linda hesitated, unsure how much he knew. "It doesn't matter," she said. "One time was too many. Can't we just move past it?" "Are you serious?" "How long, Linda?" Dave demanded, sounding pretty annoyed. Linda admitted that it had been going on since before he met Sonia, so about 17 years. Dave said, bitterly, "You cheated for 17 years and you think that?" "It doesn't matter, but it was selfish and hurtful," Linda conceded. Ally, unable to hold back, burst out, "Mom, how could you do this? You've ruined Dad and me." Dave stood abruptly, anger boiling over. "Who the hell are you, Linda?" Ally added angrily. "Yeah, let's see, liar, cheater, traitor, and a witch." Linda looked to Dave for support. "Please, Dave, tell her not to call me names." Linda pleaded with Dave, who responded coldly when she said something untrue. The room fell silent, broken only by Linda's quiet sobs. Finally, Linda asked, "What are you going to do?" "Go to your room, clean yourself up, and calm down. Your crying is just making us angrier. We'll talk before Ally and I leave, but we need to fix this." "Where are you going?" "That's not your concern, and we won't fix anything in a few hours. Go upstairs." Dave ordered Linda to go upstairs as planned. He sent a message to Linda's sister, Shell, saying, "All set. You'll need to be here in 30 minutes. Shell replied, "I'll be there." Linda sat on the bed sobbing for a while. Then she began to think of ways to salvage her family. But then she had a harsh realization. This would no longer be her bed. She had ruined everything for nothing. Fresh tears flowed as she processed the loss. 20 minutes later, she returned downstairs, still upset but more composed. Dave began, bluntly, "First, you know you're fired." Linda's tears started again. "Why?" she protested. "I'm good at my job," she said. "Do you really need to ask? I don't trust you anymore, and I don't want you around." Dave responded, sounding pretty cold. Linda lowered her eyes, struggling to control her emotions. He told her about the initial costs, but made it clear that if she wanted to challenge them, she'd have to pay. Trembling, Linda said the situation felt harsh and asked if they could try to fix things. Dave ignored her plea, telling her that Shelley would arrive soon to support her. He suggested that she go with Shelley for a while because he wasn't ready to talk. He added that when they were both ready, they could talk. She could stay in the guest room until they made more permanent arrangements. Desperation crept into Linda's voice as she asked if she could stay. Dave, losing patience, snapped that he didn't want to see her face for a while. His words cut deeply. Linda paused before asking if there was really no chance for reconciliation. Dave, with finality, said he didn't see a way. Out of nowhere, Linda brought up the 17 years she'd spent with Dave's brother and how she destroyed 2 marriages and split 3 families. Dave confirmed, explaining it wasn't just their marriage and Sonia and Rich's, but also his parents, as his brother was now dead to him. The gravity of her actions sank in, and Linda murmured for God's forgiveness. Dave said that while God might forgive her, maybe he would too someday. Shelley arrived just then and Dave hugged her before calling Ally from her room as he was leaving. He quickly glanced at Linda and saw the pain in each other's faces and felt the full weight of their lives being torn apart. The bond of 18 years was now cruelly severed, and it would take time to heal. Dave and Ally drove in silence, aware of the plan but unsure if they were ready. Dave initially thought about savoring the moment, but quickly realized it would cause pain, especially to his parents, who were already at Sonia and Rich's house for dinner. As they arrived, his heart raced, but Ally squeezed his hand and said, "Dad will get through this. Stay strong." Dave told Ally to give the picture to her grandparents when he gave it to Sonia. "I've got it," she replied confidently. Dave gave their grandparents a photo of Rich and Linda together, and Ally did the same with their own grandparents. The room filled with gasps as everyone processed the images. Dave then handed a copy to Rich and demanded an explanation. Rich turned pale and slumped into a chair. Their father demanded answers. Sonia slapped Rich, cursing him. Dave intervened, urging her to let Rich speak, but Rich stammered and was unable to defend himself. He asked where the picture came from, and Dave sharply replied that it was the wrong question, insisting Rich admit the truth. Sonia begged for an explanation, and Dave revealed that Rich and Linda had been having an affair with Rich since before Sonia met him. When she found out, she attacked Rich until she collapsed in tears and ran to the living room, where her mother and Ally comforted her. Their father confronted Rich, demanding confirmation. Rich tearfully admitted the truth. Their father expressed disgust, calling Rich a traitor for betraying his own brother and wife. Rich tried to apologize, but Dave cut him off, saying that he didn't want to see him again and that he was fired. He also informed Rich that he was no longer his brother. The father tried to calm Dave down, but Dave was firm. He said that if Rich was around, he would leave, and if it happened too often, their father would have made his choice. The father sighed, understanding Dave's stance, but asking not to be expected to cut Rich off completely. Dave accepted, but warned that the situation wasn't going to be fixed easily. Sonia came back in, shouting at Rich to get out and pack his things. Their father agreed, telling Rich not to think about staying with them. Rich looked at his mother, but she just looked at him with contempt as he went to get his things. Dave stopped him. He asked for his office keys and told him to go and see Bill Hardwick on Monday to hand in his company car and get a severance package. He also took Rich's computer, which made Rich panic. Rich said he had personal stuff on the computer, but Dave said it was company stuff. Dave said he'd get Rich's personal stuff back on Monday. Rich lunged at Dave and threw a punch. Dave retaliated, knocking Rich to the floor. The room erupted in chaos as others tried to intervene, but Dave's father finally calmed him down with a hug. They both stood, and Rich lay semi-conscious on the floor. Dave was still on the floor, feeling defeated, but he managed to regain his composure. He apologized to Sonia for springing this on her and asked if they could talk privately over the weekend. Sonia was unsure, but she agreed. Dave then apologized to his parents, and his mother responded gently, saying they understood and would talk later. Dave agreed, then turned to Ally and asked if she was ready to go home. Ally stood by his side, ready to leave. Before leaving, Dave asked his father if he and his mother would stay to help Sonia and ensure Rich left quietly. His father nodded, assuring him they would handle it. Dave, with resignation, remarked that it was just him and Ally now. His father reassured him. Dave and Ally left in silence, while Dave regretted the scene. He felt some relief from venting his anger, but a more pressing thought soon occupied his mind. Ally noticed it too. Why was Uncle Rich so protective of his computer bag? What's in there? I'm wondering the same thing. Dave replied, "Let's go home and find out." "Daddy, are you okay? You seemed out of control." Ally asked, her concern evident. "I'm fine, just sore." Dave replied with a forced chuckle, "I was worried you might hurt Grandpa when he tried to stop you." Ally admitted, "I guess I was more than out of control, huh?" "Definitely, but it probably felt good," Ally said with a small smile. They exchanged a knowing look, both aware of the tension but also the bond between them. Meanwhile, Rich packed his belongings into suitcases and trash bags, seething that his affair had been exposed and that Dave had taken his computer bag. He made sure to load he put the box into one of his suitcases, knowing he'd need its contents without saying goodbye. He drove north, needing to disappear, unsure of when Dave would uncover all his secrets. Rich's plans were disorganized at best. He aimed to find a small town in Wyoming or Idaho, rent a place with cash, and then ditch his car further west. He thought about stealing a vehicle or taking a train or bus to avoid detection without access to the files on his computer. He was lost. How did everything go to hell so fast? He muttered angrily, unaware that he'd overlooked two crucial things in his panic back home. Dave realized they hadn't eaten, so they grabbed fast food on the way back. They felt both relieved and saddened by Linda's absence when they got to the empty house after dinner. Dave took Rich's computer bag to his office and started looking through it. Everything seemed normal until he found an envelope from a big client. It was addressed to Rich's cleaning services and had a check for $99 in it. $900, Dave muttered to himself about Rich's activities while looking through the papers. He didn't find anything immediately suspicious, so he booted up the computer and discovered a hidden file. He immediately called his lawyer friend Bill. Bill asked how things had gone, and Dave, sounding serious, replied that it was as expected, but that Dave explained that it was serious and asked Bill to come over, as he needed urgent help. Bill offered to bring Angela, but Dave said it wasn't necessary, though she was welcome. Bill arrived 25 minutes later. Dave showed him the check and the contents of the hidden file. Bill examined the evidence and confirmed Dave's suspicions, saying it pointed to bribery and extortion. Dave was also worried that Rich might have committed tax evasion, which could lead to federal charges. He asked Bill if the FBI would need to get involved, and Bill said it was likely. He also said that Rich could face jail time. When Dave asked what to do, Bill said he would contact someone at the FBI. He said it was important to act quickly if Rich was unstable. Bill then left a message with his FBI contact and returned. To Dave, Bill said they should meet the agent early in the morning. Bill suggested taking the bag and the check with him in case Rich tried to get them back. Dave agreed that was a good idea. As Bill was leaving, he joked about Dave making a habit of after-hours legal services. Dave played along, asking what kind of premium Bill had in mind. Bill suggested a bottle of 14-year-old Balvin single malt. Bill suggested holding off on giving Rich the severance agreement as written to avoid tipping him off about the FBI. Dave agreed, and then Bill left, smiling for the first time that evening. Dave had planned to talk with Sonia and his parents on Saturday, but Bill's early morning call changed that. They had a 10 a.m. Steve Majors from the FBI in Philadelphia was there too. Ally wanted to come along, so she did. They'd made decisions together at the meeting, so Dave and Bill showed him the evidence. Jack Sims was Major's boss. He looked at the documents and asked, "We've got a spreadsheet of bribes, an unpaid check from the latest one and details of an offshore account. How much money is in the account?" 000 your company agent Majors asked. "I believe so." Dave confirmed Rich was allowed to negotiate project prices as long as the margin didn't drop below 23%. It looks like he set prices just above that limit and took bribes in return. You have 14 clients who participated. They'll also face charges. Agent Majors continued. "Yes," Dave said. "Do you know where Rich is?" Majors asked. "No," Dave replied. He was supposed to meet Bill on Monday for severance, but after how he reacted when I took his computer bag and the fact that his family kicked him out, he's probably on the run. Agent Major picked up on Dave's concerns. Steve tracked his phone. After a while, Steve came back. He's on the move, heading west on Interstate 71 in Ohio. Let's keep an eye on him and arrest him late Sunday. Majors decided we'll coordinate with local authorities and hold him for 48 hours without charges, so we have time to prepare formal charges by Monday. On the way home, Dave, Bill, and Ally chatted. Dave had other concerns, though, particularly about the DNA test. If it showed Rich was her father, Dave had planned to fight for 18 years of child support. But with Rich likely heading to prison, that plan was no longer necessary. Dave felt a sense of relief. Bill dropped off, and Dave and Ally arranged to meet with Sonia. During the meeting, Dave's parents expressed their disappointment and anger, respectively. Sonia, however, was more concerned about her future and that of her children. "Dave, what should I do? How will we manage?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dave outlined a plan. "First, you need a lawyer for the divorce. Use mine. Angela Hall. If Rich goes to jail, you should get the majority of your shared assets. The FBI says the stolen company money will be returned, and I'll need some of it to reorganize the rest, which will go into a trust for you and the boys. You have a business degree, so I'd be honored if you took over Linda's role at the company. You can work from home and still look after your boys. How does that sound?" Sonia hugged Dave in relief, and his parents also offered their support. Dave smiled at Ally, who was proud of how her dad always looked out for the family on the way home. Dave brought up the DNA test again. Ally replied, "It's hard to decide, but I think we should do it. Are you okay with that?" Dave asked. "I'm not angry and I agree," she replied. "I'll get the test kits this week. You know this won't change how much I love you, right?" Ally said softly. "It won't change how I feel about you either. I just want to know," Dave replied. He felt some relief after discussing the DNA test with Ally, though he knew there was still a lot of work to do. He could see the end of this nightmare approaching. Rich drove west on Interstate 80 through the night, stopping at a McDonald's for breakfast and to rest just before entering Ohio. He searched for destinations on his iPad and decided on Sioux Falls, which was remote yet large enough to blend in. He booked a cheap furnished room and planned to ditch his car near Fargo, take a bus back, and lay low. He felt better, but as he drove, doubts crept in and he realized how flawed his plan was. Despite his fear, he felt trapped and couldn't turn back. Thoughts of surrender crossed his mind, but they scared him even more. He kept going, thinking about his family and the damage he had done. He forced himself to focus on anger, knowing he was now the hunted. Regret had no place. Exhaustion eventually forced him to pull into a Cracker Barrel parking lot for a few hours of sleep. On Sunday morning, he woke up just in time for breakfast. Then he hit the road again, driving aimlessly as he reflected on his actions. The weight of his choices grew heavier, but he tried to push it aside. By evening, he stopped at a diner near Omaha, still 200 miles from Souhs, where he had a motel reservation. As he approached the diner, two men asked if he was Richard Pearson. He knew it was over. The FBI had caught up with him on Monday morning. Dave brought donuts, bagels, and coffee for an all-staff meeting before that at 8 a.m. He met with Debbie Gleon and Tammy Fields to announce their promotions at the meeting. He introduced them as the new sales team, and the staff was supportive despite the recent turmoil. After delivering the news, Dave refocused on moving forward with both his business and personal life. The next day, Rich was formally charged with multiple felonies, and the FBI began investigating the clients involved in the bribes. Knowing he would lose some customers, Dave started restructuring the business. He was planning to spin off part of the manufacturing and develop a new distribution company. He finalized these plans just in time for Linda's return. He knew he would need all his strength to navigate the challenges ahead. That Friday night, Dave and Ally had dinner at their favorite Chinese restaurant. Their routine was disrupted by Linda's absence during dinner. Dave received a call from Linda who wanted to discuss coming home. Dave's cold response made it clear their relationship was strained. He confirmed. He'd hired a lawyer and ended the call quickly. Ally noticed his tension and offered silent support. Despite the heavy atmosphere, their bond grew stronger as they faced the situation together. The next morning, Ally and Dave were in the living room when Linda walked in. Ally immediately went upstairs without acknowledging her mother. Dave noticed Linda's resentment before returning to his iPad. Linda greeted Dave, but he signaled her to wait after finishing his game. He set the iPad aside and asked if she had read the papers. Linda confirmed she had and asked if they could talk about staying together as a family, expressing her fear of everything changing. Dave questioned whether she meant staying married while she continued doing what she wanted. Linda insisted that wasn't her intention, saying they had been a happy family and she couldn't bear the thought of it ending. She promised never to risk it again, but Dave wasn't convinced. He pointed out that she hadn't considered the consequences of her 17 after a year-long affair. She wanted to stay together just to avoid the fallout. He accused her of having fun with his brother while he was clueless at home. She denied loving Rich, admitting she didn't even like him much. She described him as selfish and terrible in bed. He was in disbelief, quietly remarking that she had risked everything for 17 years for a man she didn't even like. She never tried to end it, yet she still couldn't explain why. She sobbed and admitted she didn't know why she had done it. She said it was a stupid and selfish mistake. She explained that the first time was a drunken mistake and after that, Rich threatened to tell Dave if they didn't continue. She acknowledged getting a small thrill from getting away with it, but couldn't fully explain her actions. Dave told Linda they were done seeing her sobbing. He softened slightly, offering her time to pull herself together and asking if she wanted water. When she whispered that she did, he handed her a bottle from the fridge. He then told her that when she was ready, they would discuss the paperwork at the table upstairs. Ally sat on her bed listening to her parents argue. She tried not to cry, but hearing their pain, especially her father's, broke her heart. She decided to build a life with him while her mother could suffer in her own misery. Dave went to the restroom, letting out tears. He didn't want Linda to see. He knew he had to harden himself and distance his emotions. When he came out, he saw Linda. Slowly walking to the dining room, her puffy face and red eyes showing her sorrow, Dave felt torn between satisfaction at her suffering and a desire to end her pain. He decided that he would stop yelling. He apologized for yelling and promised to keep it together. Linda said that he could yell, curse or even hit her if it meant staying together, but she knew it wouldn't happen. Dave confirmed it wouldn't and asked if she had read the papers. Linda softly said she had and acknowledged. They were fair but pleaded not to give up. Ally offered to give up some money instead, but Dave firmly refused. He explained that he and Ally had a special bond and that he couldn't lose her too. He also pointed out that in a few months Ally would be 16 and could choose for herself, making it foolish to go against her wishes now. Linda argued that he wouldn't lose Ally and that he needed to heal their relationship, which he couldn't do if Ally wasn't with her. Dave insisted it wouldn't work that way, noting Dave said that Ally felt nothing but rage towards her mother and that living apart would help her process it. He warned that forcing Ally to stay would only make things worse. Linda, frustrated, shouted that she wasn't giving Ally up. Unbeknownst to them, Ally had been listening nearby. She suddenly burst into screaming at her mother, calling her names and listing every betrayal for over 10 minutes. Ally unleashed her anger, confronting Linda whenever she tried to turn away. At one point, Ally grabbed her mother's chin, forcing her to face the fury she had caused. Dave watched, then gently pulled Ally away, comforting her as she calmed down. Linda, shaken and struggling to hold back tears, pleaded with Ally, saying she loved her and needed her with her. Ally, now calmer, firmly replied that it wasn't happening and warned that if she were forced to stay, she would make Linda's life miserable with Dave not around to stop her. When Linda asked what had happened to calling her mom, Ally coldly responded that everyone wanted to know, adding a harsh insult before returning to her room, satisfied and smiling to herself, overwhelmed by sadness. Linda realized she couldn't stay in the house during the divorce. She didn't want to rent her own place since she planned to fight for custody and the house. She temporarily moved in with her sister. The divorce case was before Judge Stan Lawson, who had reviewed both petitions and had a clear idea of how it would go. He usually recommended counseling, but in this case, he was unsure. The affair with the husband's brother made it unlikely that they would reconcile. The main issue was custody of their daughter. The judge usually favored the mother. Ally was almost old enough to decide for herself. The judge decided to see how things would play out in court. The session began with Linda's attorney stating that his client didn't want a divorce and requested 12 counseling sessions. The judge expected this to be a waste of time and money. The attorney then raised the issue of custody. The judge interrupted, saying he wanted to speak privately with Ally and invited her to his office for lunch, despite Linda's objections. The judge firmly denied her request, ensuring Ally's safety through a court official in his office. The judge greeted Ally warmly, encouraging her to relax, though she remained respectful and formal. Their conversation started casually, with the judge gauging Ally's maturity, which impressed him. When they discussed custody, the judge explained that the mother usually gets custody and asked Ally how she felt about that. Ally firmly stated her opinion. That this traditional approach didn't account for everything that had happened and wasn't what she believed was best. She explained that she belonged with her father, citing their close relationship and the emotional harm her mother caused. When the judge noted that her mother might need her too, Ally clarified that her stance wasn't about revenge but about what was right for her and her father. She also mentioned that in 3 months she could choose where to live and that if forced to stay with her mother now, she would return to court. To change the arrangement, she said that staying with her mother would make things worse and that she would find a way to be with her father, regardless of the court's decision. The judge was impressed by Ally's maturity and joked that she might have considered becoming a lawyer. Ally said that she planned to help out on a paralegal team next summer. The judge praised her and said that he would make his decision soon. Ally was confident that she would still like the judge after he made his ruling. They shared a light-hearted moment. Before the judge took her back to her father, there was a lovely moment where they all smiled, shook hands and parted ways. When Ally found her father, she told him she felt the meeting had gone well. She said that they would know for sure when the court resumed. The judge said that he had had a good conversation with Ally and that both parents should be proud of her. She presented her thoughts calmly and professionally and he had considered them in his decision. As the judge was about to continue, Linda interrupted, urging her lawyer to speak up. The judge was clearly annoyed and interrupted her. His legal counsel interjected, "Your Honor, there seems to be an issue. My client has informed me of a matter that might impact your decision." "Go ahead." The judge replied, "Very well, but it better be important." The lawyer took a breath and continued, "Mrs. Pearson believes there's a possibility that Mr. David Pearson isn't Ali's biological father, which could affect his custody claim." The judge remained firm, "Counselor, this is irrelevant under Pennsylvania custody law. You should know that, but for clarity, Mrs. Pearson, do you?" "Counselor, do you have any evidence that he asked?" The judge turned to Linda. Linda admitted that she didn't have any evidence yet. Her attorney then requested to stay for a DNA test. Dave glanced at Ally, who smiled knowingly. His lawyer stood and replied, "We anticipated this and have certified DNA test results proving Mr. David Pearson is indeed Ali's father." He handed the documents to the court and Linda's attorney. "Thank you, Counselor Hall. This is a relief for father and daughter. The motion for a stay is denied." Linda broke down in tears as the lawyer tried to comfort her. Judge Lawson continued, saying that in most cases, primary custody goes to the mother. "I believe it's in everyone's best interest to honor Ali's wishes and grant Mr. Pearson's petition. Mrs. Pearson, it saddens me to see this family torn apart." He then delivered the final ruling: the divorce is granted with a final judgment in 6 to 8 weeks. Court is adjourned. Ally rushed to her father, hugging him tightly, as they left the courtroom. Linda, with anger in her eyes, approached them. She asked Dave, "Are you happy now?" He responded softly, "What's going on with you, Linda? No one won today. We all lost. Go home, and we'll talk later." Linda collapsed onto a bench, and her lawyer tried to console her as she muttered, "But I love you. This isn't right." Dave heard her, but he kept walking and held Ally close. In the following weeks, the fallout from Richard and Linda's actions played out. Rich pleaded guilty to avoid trial and a long prison sentence. He revealed hidden assets and agreed to serve 8 years in federal prison. Linda found a job 25 miles away. He bought a townhouse with money from Dave. It was close enough to ally, but far from his old friends, who no longer wanted to know. Dave focused on restructuring his business. Debbie did really well in sales, getting big orders from new clients and keeping most of them involved in the bribery scandal. Tammy supported her perfectly, making sure everything ran smoothly. Dave planned to expand the sales team with Debbie as the likely leader. As for his personal life, Dave didn't seem interested in dating, despite friends encouraging him to date Ally or other women from church. It seemed like she was eager to catch his attention, but he wasn't in a rush. He missed Linda more than he thought he would, but he didn't dwell on it when he thought about the future. There was only one woman on his mind one Wednesday morning, months after the judge's ruling. Hannah walked into Dave's office with the mail. "Hey boss, looks like the divorce papers arrived." Dave opened the envelope. "Yep, right on time. 7 weeks later, I'm officially a free man. How do you feel about that?" Dave paused. "It's a mix of sadness, happiness, relief, and anxiety, mostly. I feel anticipation. What Linda and I had was special, and now that it's over I want to find that special feeling again. Do you know what I mean?" "Yes, I do," Hannah replied with a half smile, wondering if this was the right moment. She started to leave but hesitated at the door, then quietly confessed, "Dave, I want something special too. I've been afraid to say this, but I love you. I've loved you since the day you interviewed me. You don't have to respond now, but if you're interested, ask me out when you're ready." "My answer will be yes." He wrapped his arms around her and kissed her neck. He whispered, "Dinner tonight." He was still in her arms. She turned to see his smile and sparkling eyes. She said, "My place at 6. She suggested, "I'll cook and wear something casual." Her wide smile lit up her face. The bottle of wine and lasagna quickly disappeared. Dinner became an afterthought. Their deep friendship blossomed into something more. Hannah whispered to Dave that she wanted to be with him. Dave smiled and told her that he could think of plenty of reasons for that. Playfully pulled away with mischief in her eyes and demanded all those reasons immediately. Dave eagerly agreed, ready to take her to the bedroom for the next 2 weeks. Dave and Hannah spent every night together after romantic dinners at her house one evening. Dave whispered that it was time and without hesitation carried her to the bedroom, feeling his life fall into perfect harmony. Later, Dave told Hannah he was done holding back. He confessed his love for her, saying he never wanted their relationship to end. Hannah smiled. Dave was reassured that they had each other and that if he was certain she wanted them to never part, he was ready. Hannah teased him, calling him a smartass, but clarified that she knew what he meant. Dave then acknowledged that while others might think they were moving too fast, he didn't care. Hannah agreed, saying that she'd lived with these feelings for years and that it felt right to her too. 6 months later, they got married at their church and celebrated with a casual pig roast in their backyard. With 200 guests, the kids enjoyed the pool and entertainment while the adults danced and relaxed under a marquee. A small band played, and everyone had plenty to celebrate. Some were surprised by how quickly they married, especially since Hannah was 8 years younger than Dave. The explanation was simple: they knew they had found the right partner, and Hannah was 3 months pregnant. At 30, they planned to have more children. As the party wound down, Hannah noticed Linda had arrived and went to greet her. Both women were unsure how the visit would go. Linda quickly eased the tension by smiling and embracing Hannah. She congratulated her warmly, commenting on the wonderful celebration. Hannah thanked her, joked about Dave's pig roasts and asked how Linda was doing. Linda admitted she was still working on herself but was much better than months ago. She assured Hannah that she was genuinely happy for her and Dave. At that moment, Dave joined them and gave Linda a warm hug, expressing his gladness she had come through. Linda explained. She didn't want to be the ex who stole the show, but she said she was happy for them. Dave thanked her and asked if she was ready for Al to spend 3 weeks with her while he and Hannah were on their honeymoon. Linda said she was looking forward to it, but she hoped Ally wouldn't dread it too much. Linda mentioned that Ally felt guilty about some things, but she reassured Dave that they would be fine. Dave chuckled and asked if Linda was going to meet his emotional support animal, which puzzled her. She asked if he still had Banjo. Dave laughed and said Banjo would be with Ally. He meant the pig they roasted. They all laughed and joked about the idea of throwing Dave into the pool. No two divorces are alike. People react differently when life falls apart. After discovering Linda's affair, Dave doubted he'd ever find happiness again. Ally mourned the loss of her family. Hannah feared she'd either live without love or settle for less. They were all broken. But in the end, Dave, Hannah, and Ally found more happiness than before. Even though everything fell apart, they hoped Linda and Sonia would find the same healing. 10 years later, the pastor asked who gave Allie to be married. Dave replied firmly, "Her mother and I." He then placed Allie's hand in Nathan Lawson's, the grandson of Judge Stanley Lawson. Dave joined Hannah, who was shedding happy tears. Linda sat nearby with her fiancé. Hannah and Linda had rekindled their friendship. Dave kept his distance from his ex. Dave didn't feel the need to avoid his wife, though. His love for Hannah and their 3 children had healed past wounds. Dave sat down, and Hannah whispered, "Nice touch, Mr. Pearson." Mothers plural. Dave smiled, proud of his 10-year-old. Old daughter Sarah Allie was the maid of honor, his youngest Jenna was the flower girl, and little Dave Jr., now 3, was the ring bearer. He was really happy and felt very grateful. Ally had graduated top of her class from Temple University Law School, where she met and fell in love with Nate. They dated. Dave and Judge Lawson became close friends, which made it easier for them to blend their families. Nate focused on criminal law. Dave joined Bill Hardwick's office while Ally worked with Angela Hall's team on family law. Dave's business did really well, and at 48 he and Hannah planned to retire when he turned 55. He wasn't a billionaire, but his financial planning made their goals achievable. Sonia remarried a great guy who managed the Eastern Territory of a pump company. Dave's business, together with her 2 boys from Rich, meant they now had a 4-year. Dave's parents had retired and were doing well. They were happy to pass on Sunday family dinners to Dave and Hannah. 3 months after Allie's wedding, Dave's father broke a promise and brought up Rich. He told Dave that Rich was leaving next week and wanted to see the family before he left. Dave said he had thought about reaching out since Rich's release from prison. He also mentioned hearing that Rich had joined a missionary group. Dave's father confirmed this. He said that Rich was going to Tanzania as a water purification specialist. After speaking with a prison ministry, Dave agreed to the visit but warned that Sonia and her family might not be happy about it. His father reassured him that they were fine with it since Rich had already visited them. Dave was surprised since Sonia hadn't mentioned it, but his father reminded him that Dave had made it clear he didn't want anything to do with Rich. Dave acknowledged this and asked what his father thought of Rich now. His father reflected, admitting that Rich's actions had felt like a personal attack and it hurt deeply. He said that if it hadn't been for Ally, Dave said, he didn't know how he would have coped. Dave agreed they had stayed strong through it all. His father then shared that Rich had always felt like an outsider in the family and saw Dave as the perfect son. Dave couldn't compete with him, even though they had never shown favoritism. After some reflection, Dave decided he owed it to both of them to talk and clear the air. His father was relieved, knowing Dave would see it that way. Dave shared how he recently felt overwhelmed with joy and peace, thinking about how things had turned out after the chaos. Dave said that 10 years ago, Sonia had remarried. Rich's stolen money was recovered, and his business had thrived. When his father asked if Dave was saying that what Rich did ended up being a blessing, Dave admitted that in some ways it had. However, the end of his marriage to Linda was a tragic loss. Dave expressed deep love for Hannah and wouldn't trade her for anything. His father asked if Dave loved Hannah more than Linda. Dave explained that he loved Hannah differently but just as strongly. He still had feelings for Linda, but they weren't the same as before. What mattered now was his commitment to Hannah. His father was reassured, but then asked how Dave felt about Rich. Dave admitted that while he hated what Rich had done, he was strangely grateful for how things turned out. Rich had paid with over 8 years of his life, so Dave no longer felt anger or a desire for revenge. He still loved Rich because he was his brother, but he would never trust him the same way again. His father admired Dave's perspective, acknowledging that it wasn't easy to find positives in such a situation. Dave thought about how everyone involved had ended up in a better place, except perhaps Linda. Sonia was happier, his business was thriving, and his marriage to Hannah and their 3 kids brought him immense joy. Even Rich had found a better version of himself through prison and faith. His father called Dave an optimist, and Dave responded by asking if that was a bad thing. His father expressed concern, recalling how broken Dave had been. Dave agreed but shared how he eventually realized that what Rich had done was like shattering a prize. China, with a little help from God, he'd picked up the pieces and made something even better. His father asked if Dave was saying that what was broken was now better than ever, and Dave said yes. His father was proud of how Dave had turned life's challenges into something amazing. Dave was grateful for the support he'd received from his father, Hannah, an ally. He said he couldn't have done it alone. His father said what he'd built was truly special and that he was glad to have lived. Dave was happy to share that he was glad his father had lived to see it too and that he believed Rich would be pleased with how things had turned out. He felt it was time to talk to Rich and finally move on from the past. His father agreed, confident that Dave would handle it well, feeling ready for whatever came next. Dave reflected that while the past had shaped him, it didn't define him. He had found a new future filled with love, hope and the promise of something even better. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly at peace.